Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start the Classical Theology live stream. And it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be looking at a few statements by a couple of well-known theologians. One loves to ride a bicycle. And the other fella, well, he likes to, debate and say some things that we're going to disclose here today. So let's get ready. Good. We'll be talking about divine simplicity. You know, that's a fun topic for us nerds. So welcome to the Classical Theology live stream with Dr. Brian. Hopefully my name is Jorge Gil. I am the co-host and producer of the show. And without further ado, we got Dr. Hufflin today. Dr. Hufflin talked to us about this topic today. I know it's a difficult topic in the sense that it is philosophically difficult, theologically difficult, and people sometimes just dismiss it overall because some people say it's even heretical. Some people say it's unintelligible. Some people say it's not theological, that this is just completely, kind of like, let me get a big old Texas hat and pull a fat rabbit out of it. And that's what we're going to call divine simplicity. But it's something that is being held for thousands of years. It's been developed, polished. So how central is divine simplicity to our classical theology? And what exactly is divine simplicity and what we should even care about it?
Yeah, great questions, man. I would say over the course of church history, divine simplicity has been, if not one of the most central attributes of God, maybe the most central. Because if divine simplicity isn't true, we'll discuss what that is in a second, then classical theology pretty much just is completely false. And of course, there are people today who think that's just the case, that classical theology is just false. But historically throughout the church, the overwhelming majority of the church held to classical theology, held to simplicity. Now, that doesn't make it true, right? Based on how many people held to it. So we're not trying to say truth is determined by vote or how many people held to something. I think it does maybe call into question this notion that it is unintelligible or incoherent or just crazy ridiculous and shouldn't be held, because it has been held by a lot of people, very, very intelligent people, very brilliant people. So what is it? So divine simplicity is the notion that God is not made up of various parts. What kind of parts, you ask? Any kind of parts. So if we take a human, we have parts. If you're a Christian, you have an immaterial part, you have a material part, which for traditional philosophy and theology would be considered your formal aspect, your material aspect. We've discussed this already on the show, act and potency, which is just existence and the power to exist in a certain way or to change. We have substance and accident, meaning that we are in our substance or our essence. We are humans, but to be human doesn't mean you're a certain color, you're a certain height, you're even a certain gender, anything like that. But for God, there is no distinction with whatever God is and whatever God has. So we would say that we have knowledge, we have power, we have justice or whatever. But if you hold to divine simplicity, that just means that God, whatever he has, he is. So it's not like he is modified by some property like knowledge or power or fill in the blank with whatever property you want to throw in there. God just is those things. And so why does it matter? Well, the church has thought it has mattered because if God does have different quote unquote parts or aspects of his existence, then he must be complex or composed. Complex meaning having different parts, and composed meaning put together by something else. So an example that I've used over the years is, Legos are really, really popular to people and familiar. So Legos are different parts of a thing, and they cannot put themselves together. It takes a person transcendent to the Legos or outside the Legos to put them together. So if those Legos represent in kind of an analogous way the divine parts, if God had parts, then the argument is then those parts would have had to been put together by somebody else and depend on each other. And then if God has a composer, he's not really God.
Interesting. So let me ask you a question regarding what you just said. Is this something, because it sounds very intellectual, it sounds very academic, it sounds very niche. Is this something that only academic theologians argue about, or does it actually affect how ordinary people think about God?
Well, I think historically it was the case, and my argument is that over the last few centuries, the church, I think our culture in general, but the church in particular has been dumbed down a lot.
Yeah.
And so,
I think you can see it. I think this is something
Right.
that shows up in everyday life, shows up in our culture. A lot of brain rot out there, especially with social media devices, even with the advent of TV and now on-demand entertainment, computers. I love video games, but I know what they can do to you. Right, is almost like a drug for some people. Is almost like a god for some people. So I think culturally speaking, this is undeniable what you just said.
Yeah, and even just in the last few decades, not even centuries, but even since the middle part of last century. So it has historically been more well known around the church, and of course, pastors held or knew about it, even whether they held to it or not. Is a different story. Traditionally, they have held to it in most corners, being more controversial and more questioned today. But the interesting thing is that most pew warmers, most people in the church haven't heard about this doctrine. But what's even more surprising and disappointing is that most Protestant pastors haven't either. If you're Catholic, because most of the church's history has been Catholic, if you're a Catholic priest, you've had to have gone through a certain amount of hours in philosophy, and you're going to know about divine simplicity, especially since the church fathers taught that. But Protestants nowadays, in your normal average church, in my experience in the church, I'm in the Southern Baptist churches, in the lower churches, they just don't know about that very, very much, from what I can tell. So, yeah, there's been a lot of shifting going on.
Well, I was going to tell you, be careful, because we're talking about divine simplicity and we're going to turn people into Roman Catholics if we do that. Right.
Yeah.
That's I mean, and I say it tongue in cheek, like, making fun of it and being, adding an extra layer of sarcasm there, because there are a lot of people out there that make these silly claims that now, what's the Bible say? That even the person who is dumb, who is a fool, if they keep quiet,
That's
they
right.
can pass for a smart individual. But as soon as you open your mouth, then you're like, yeah, right. And there are individuals out there that are saying things like that, which, it's a non sequitur. Just because we're talking about divine simplicity, there's no relation to you becoming.
Yeah. And historically, Protestants have held to divine simplicity, as well as other doctrines like divine immutability, divine eternity.
That's what I was going to say. The history record is there, but people like to make these, big blanket statements that lead people to believe things that are untrue.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting too is it's not even just simply a Christian view. I mean, this goes back to at least Plato and Aristotle, who held up that the ultimate things that exist, the
Listen,
forms.
Man, now you're quoting, pagan
Pagans, I know, yeah.
Man, why do you do that, man? You and Paul doing these things, man. Stop it. Stop it. You can only quote from the King James version, and you gotta have the tulip in your pocket. If not, it doesn't come from God. You're putting man's words against God's words. Okay. People say,
get us all in trouble over here.
People say, listen, man. People say that these live streams are not fun, that classical theology is not fun, and I'm about to change their perspective here.
Yeah, we have fun over here, man. We really do.
Absolutely.
And then, but also the Muslim philosophers have held to divine simplicity. Jewish philosophers have held to divine simplicity. Eastern philosophers hold to divine simplicity in some respects. So it's not just a Christian, it's not just a Protestant view. It's very important, and there's reasons for that. I know we're gonna get into some of the objections to that today.
Okay,
but
so tell me, what is the concern if the divine simplicity is false? It's like you're making it like it's the cornerstone, the bedrock of classical theology, Dr. Huffling. Why?
And it is.
It is, right? So let's talk about it. What if divine simplicity is false?
Yeah, it is the foundation.
It is the foundation. Yeah.
So, and again, because the cornerstone and the concern of classical theology is to make God distinct from creatures. So, there was a comment on one of our reels this past week about, I forgot the exact reel or what was even really discussed, but it was about there really is no God that is just like us. Or if we were horses.
But by the way, when you're saying reels, we're talking about short videos that we're posting across multiple platforms. But you can sound across our reels. Maybe some people will spell it.
Oh yeah. So we're we're on Instagram and Facebook.
Or, in one
Twitter,
of our short
X.
clips, right. Not everybody is as hip as you.
Right.
Professor Huffling on all things social media. Okay.
Yeah, well, I've been hanging out with you, I guess, too long.
It rolls all that stuff on you. Yeah,
rolling on me. That's right.
Yeah.
So if you're not following us on those platforms, go ahead and do that. But someone said, the God is. She said, I do believe in God was not just like us, and if we were horses, if horses could imagine, they would make a God like horses. And I responded, yeah, I agree with you that God is not just like us, and that it probably is the case that if horses could think, they would have a horse-type God. We do tend to make God into our image, and that is because we don't have any kind of experience, naturally speaking, with our Creator in terms of like you and I are talking right now. So we make God to be like us because we understand that. Well, if God's like us, he's got to relate to us. He's got to be changing. He's got to be in time, maybe even physical. And so classical theology, one of our concerns is to say, God is God. God is different and distinct from creation and creatures. And a major way that is the case is that God is not, there's nothing preceding God in terms of his existence. God is God. There's nothing that precedes him. So the worry with simplicity and all these attributes we consider to be foundational for classical theology is if God is made up of some kind of parts and put together or complex, then there's got to be some kind of a composer for him, and it is not really God. And that's really the concern with all these doctrines, is that if God, if he changes, if he's in time, if he's affected by us, then he really isn't ultimate in some regard.
Thus, rejecting divine simplicity eventually leads to a smaller, more limited God. And obviously, we're using words like small and limited in an analogical way. Please understand that when we have God talk, we have to do this this way. And if you don't know what that is, you can go back to previous shows where we have unpacked some of these ideas. The idea here is to ramp up to get to a place where we can speak about these topics without having to fill in every single would say gap in your knowledge when it comes to an explanation of the terminology or the things that need to be at the bottom.
We have a sequential, systematic way of approaching this.
Yeah.
Right.
So rejecting divine simplicity eventually lead to a smaller or more limited God? And have we seen that played out in certain theological positions or traditions?
Yeah. So those of us who are really worried about divine simplicity, and those who have been that way over church history, really say that if you make God into this kind of being, he's not even a smaller God, he's a creature, because he would have to have had some kind of cause for his existence and for his quote unquote parts to be put together. This is one area, though, I would say, yes, we can talk about God analogically, but even in a univocal way, God is smaller, because you've got now people today talking about God being physical. You've got, of course, the Mormons, those in the Word Faith movement, which I used to be when I was a lot younger. So in a very literal way, God is going to be smaller, because we think God is infinite in the classical sense, but if you start demarcating God, then he's by definition going to be limited. So that is absolutely the worry.
Interesting. And you said that it is foundational in a sense that without let me say something. Well, we're going to play a video, and I just don't want to get ahead of myself, but there are people who said, well, if by divine simplicity we mean this, then it's okay. But it is the Thomistic perspective that makes it incoherent and intelligible. What would you say to someone that approach it that way, or to say, well, if you mean this by divine simplicity, you mean this, then I'm okay with it. Can somebody, whatever that this is, right?
Yeah.
Can divine simplicity be, let's say, explained or defined differently than what Aquinas?
I I think that there's different ways of looking at it or casting it out, and every doctrine, changes over time. And Aquinas is I think universally seen to be the person who really hammered it home and was who made it what we think of it today, and was really what's the right word to use here? That Aquinas was very adamant and passionate about this doctrine, but his way of understanding it goes back to Aristotle, which was 4th century BC. So it's not like Aquinas made this up. The Muslims before him held the same kind of view of simplicity. Maimonides held to these doctrines as well, Jewish philosopher. And so while Aquinas is different than Aristotle, obviously, he does have the same kind of categories, no pun intended, because that's what Aristotle's works called, categories. Aristotle said God's pure act. That's what Aquinas said. He's not made of form or matter. That's what, I didn't mean to hit that button. There you go. He's not composed of substance and accidents. So the way Aquinas talks, except for essence and existence, really isn't anything different than what Aristotle held to it. He does make it more explicit in some ways and applies it to Christian theism in the way that Aristotle didn't. But Aquinas is kind of lambasted for making it radically different than, say, Anselm or Augustine and all the rest of the medievals, but not really. I mean, he does make it paramount to his overall systematic philosophy and theology, but other than adding some categories, I think he's doing the same thing Aristotle did, because the categories he's getting is from Aristotle, and Aristotle held that his unmoved mover, as he called it, is simple as well and pure act. Well, if he can't be modified in any way and be pure act, so he's not really radically changing anything that Aristotle hadn't already said.
Okay. So first of all, let me go ahead and let everybody know that we have multiple people watching in multiple platforms. So we want to make sure to let you know, leave your questions in the chat. We actually have 2 or 3 questions already. So this has been a good start of the show. We're going to try to tackle some at the end and some that are related to what we're talking while we're talking, because one of the things that we want to do is that we want to make sure that this show is interactive, and that the people on the other side of the show can also be, to a certain degree, a distant co-host of the show, like I am, because I'm the person asking most of the questions here.
Yeah, we're here to have fun together and learn and all that.
But we want to be able to have fun and to bring you guys in. This is one of the beautiful things of the internet that allow us to interact with you guys in real time. And actually, for those who are on other platforms, we have Facebook on one side, we have X on another side. The only one that has ultra low latency, meaning that I can see what you guys are typing immediately after you hit enter, is YouTube. So if you guys want to interact with us in real time and not with a minute and a half delay, then ultra low latency is happening on YouTube and YouTube only. So now let me ask you this: how far back in the church has the doctrine of simplicity been held?
At least to Irenaeus, which is 2nd century. So we're talking and of course before that with Aristotle and Plato we go back to the 4th century. But for a Christian church, explicitly with Irenaeus.
Okay, so were there any significant voices in church history they have pushed back early on to this, the divine simplicity doctrine?
The overwhelming majority of the church has held to this. I did read someone recently who pushed back on it, but I can't remember who that was. But it was pretty universally held that God was not made up of parts. Okay. Yeah, because people were normally in the medieval church, you're either going to fall into the Platonic camp or the Aristotelian camp. And both of them held to simplicity.
All right. So there was no other dominant view that would push back on simplicity. Now, again,
I don't know of any view that was dominant like that. There are people across scattered who had their own views of things, of course, scattered around. But they're not a school of thought that I can think of off the top of my head that was explicitly anti-simplicity.
All right. So if this is such an important attribute, why don't we hear about it in church? Because I'm going to be honest, it wasn't until I started listening to lectures, and this was even before my time at SES, that's Southern Evangelical Seminary, ses.edu, if you want to get a good classical theology education and a good apologetics education, that's where you go, ses.edu. But even before my time at Southern Evangelical Seminary, I started listening to lectures, and some people were, and actually the majority of people that I was listening to at that time, they were pushing back on divine simplicity. And that's how I found out about divine simplicity, because I started listening to some of what in my estimation, were much more solid thinkers and theologians. And one of these was Geisler, and Geisler was in favor of divine simplicity, which is one of the reasons how I ended up at Southern Evangelical Seminary. Right? So if this is such an important attribute of God, why don't we hear about this in church more?
That's a great question. I have these are all just my personal opinions. One is that a lot of pastors, and especially in my circles, they don't know about it. They just flat out don't know about simplicity. They don't really know a lot about theology. And I know that sounds kind of harsh, but that's my experience. I mean, I have worked on 4 church staffs. I've been involved in church while in seminary for 22 years in various capacities. And a lot of pastors they really focus on helping people and being motivational and, being there. And admittedly, pastors are dragged and pulled in 20 different directions. And they want to be they need to be in every committee. They need help with counseling and visiting. And I get that. But a lot of pastors just don't know a lot about it. And I guess I would blame the seminaries for that, because these guys are going to school and they have degrees. And going through.
I was gonna say something. I said I could understand if this is happening out in Latin America, where a lot of the guys who are leading churches are doing it out of necessity because there are no workers. The workers are very few, and the guy who has the, I will say, best understanding is the guy that they're gonna put behind the pulpit. Exactly. Right, but here in the States, it's a completely different ball game, man. I don't. It's hard for me to understand why this is happening.
Yeah, that's one reason. I worked at a church. I'm not trying to knock on anybody in particular. Pastor had left, and we were looking for an interim pastor. I was the associate pastor, basically of youth, and one of our seminary professors applied to be the interim pastor, and he would have been absolutely amazing because he's a wonderful teacher.
Right.
And they literally, the head of deacons told me, we don't want someone to teach like seminary. We don't want teaching. We want motivational messages.
What? Well, for example, let me ask you. Well, let me tell you this. So we have our Bible professor, which is a professor at SES, who has been pastoring for a long time.
The Bible professor, the YouTube Bible professor, is that what you're talking about? Mel, yeah.
Yeah. So you have Mel, who's been teaching for a long time, who's also an SES professor.
Right.
And he has a long track record. Of course, he understands simplicity because he's part of the SES family. So do you know anybody else that does what Mel does in terms of incorporating good, like solid classical theology into their day-to-day pastoring method or approach?
Yeah, I mean, you got people like James Dolezal, for example, and a lot of professors are doing ministry. They're maybe not be classical in their ministry. Yeah, there aren't a lot because there aren't very many people. Well, I don't know a lot of people who are classical theists who are also pastors, or classical theologians who are also pastors. There are some.
So
most pastors I know wouldn't know what that really is, honestly.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, if this is a failure of theological education or just the church intentionally moved away from this classical category.
Well, I think it's a mixture, and this is specifically Protestant. You don't have this problem from the priesthood in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, the Catholic Church, they just have to hold to this. Period.
Yeah, you can't be a priest without having a degree or having a certain number of hours in philosophy.
And holding to these things. Maybe you can if you don't. If you kind of keep it quiet under wraps, that you don't hold to the classical theology position of divine simplicity in the Catholic Church.
Oh, there's different views. I mean, I think most of them hold to that. Right. But there's different views. It's not as uniform as people want to say. So we have that view with pastors. There's just this ignorance there. And I do blame the schools for the most part because they're not teaching it.
Right.
A lot of times. Now, of course, that's a broad statement. Of course, some schools do. And then some people are more just pragmatically oriented and think that people don't want to hear this stuff in church. They want to hear, how can I have a better relationship with Jesus? How can I be motivated? And there's a lot of truth to that too. People in some regards don't want the ivory tower theology. However, I'm going to say that that's not necessarily the case, because I taught at this church as well one time. I was asked to speak one Sunday morning because the pastor was sick. Spoke on communion, because that was what we were doing. We were doing communion that day. And I just gave the Lord's Supper account from Matthew and said, here's the Catholic view, here's the Lutheran view, here's our view, and here's why we have our view. And I had people in their 70s come up to me afterwards who were raised in that church,
right, and
said, we love that. We've never heard that before. And so people over the years, when you really give them solid teaching, they really do like that.
They like
so
it.
There's a perception that they don't want to be taught, but I think people do want to be taught. That's why we have this channel.
Yeah, and it's funny. We have Jake McCready saying a lot of pastors focus
my
on
buddy from Ura, Jake, is my Lee University buddy from back in college. All right.
Yeah, he said a lot of pastors now focus on experimental theology. He says they're not really doing classical theology. They're just doing this kind of psychological babble thing to be motivational speakers, and they have this it's almost like what they want is and I know they have I'm not saying even if they're doing that they don't have a difficult job, but I think that they're making their lives even more difficult by treating their congregants as just some sort of patient. Like they're a patient, because the church is a service, right? But it's a service for your soul,
right?
And I am a hylomorphist, so I do think that your soul, how you edify your soul, your spirit, your mind have an effect on your day-to-day and your mental health. Right. I agree on that. But I think that the approach should be the other way. It's not like you're gonna give them a psychological therapeutical sermon and then your soul is gonna get better or your spiritual side is gonna improve. I think that you tackle or you teach the truth of God, and that is going to invigorate and revitalize and give you the ability to deal with your mental health, right? I mean, and we're not going to go down that rabbit trail, but I think it's important to keep that forefront of this conversation, even though we're talking about divine simplicity, because this is one of the things that most people, if you don't have a firm foundation, when you get to a point where issues, and by the way, for Ziggy Beats and everybody who are asking all these questions, we're going to be getting to them as soon as possible.
Glad to have y'all guys here.
There you go. So
great to hear from you, Jake. Ziggy Beats, you too.
So one of the things that we want to make sure is that we give them the perspective of why this is so important, why from the bottom up we need to be able to be
because it's not obvious for people who aren't in seminary like you and I are at a seminary that puts this on such a theological pedestal.
Because I know people, graduates from seminaries, that this was a footnote on
if it was even
reading,
right.
on a reading material. All right, so what happens?
It's strange since it was so universally held in the church. I mean, this is, again, a foundational doctrine.
Yeah. What happens to a congregation's view of God over time when doctrines like this just quietly disappear from the pulpit or were never raised?
Is this a question from the chat or is this your question?
Yeah, this is a question to you.
So I think when people get away from this, and this is not a hypothetical question. We see this all the time. Churches become cultural centers, cultural religious centers to come and hang out. And there's nothing wrong with having a cultural aspect of your church. I mean, my church is great. I go there, they have a great kids program. But churches tend, when they don't do heavy theology, they just tend to be shallow. Yeah, there's just no other way to say it. Churches just become shallow, and there are people in the church, and I've had people from SES email me, what can I do because my church is not feeding me? I need more than I'm getting. What do I do? That is a really big problem for seminary grads, especially from SES, because one thing about SES, shout out to the school, is one of our mottos is we don't teach people just what to think. We teach people how to think. And we want that for our people in church as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when you get away from the meaty theology, Paul says this in the Bible. You guys should be on meat if you're still on milk. This is not a new issue. This is first century problem.
Let me get that aged steak tomahawk of theology, right? That's what we need. Don't give me that baby formula theology, right?
And I think when people get a taste of it, they really do like it.
Well,
they want more.
Yeah, absolutely, especially if it's medium rare. I mean, I'm telling you, man, give me that aged steak, medium rare theology day in and day out, babe. I become a Mediterranean, man. Tell it, Mediterranean, yeah, just a theological Mediterranean. That's what I want to be.
Okay.
So let's go ahead on and watch a video. Then we're going to talk about that video, and maybe we play another video, and then we get to the questions. If I'm not mistaken, this is about 5 minutes, maybe. It's the first video.
Yes,
this is actually a panel on divine simplicity that was held around my birthday back in November of 2018. And I didn't get to attend this. I don't know where I was. I was there at this ETS, EPS, but I just don't know where I was. And I didn't want to sit through 2 hours of this back then. I guess I had other things to do.
Yeah.
But this is what we're going to be looking today. We're going to leave this on the chat and the show notes afterwards for you guys to be able to have this. And this is actually Bill Craig going over objections to divine simplicity from his, I will say, I don't know what to call Bill's theology, but from his theological angle. Okay.
Yeah, he doesn't like systematic approach.
What do you say?
He doesn't like labels, really.
Right. Okay. Well, too bad for him. Nobody likes labels. Okay. Anyways, I don't care what he like and he don't like, but it's just he's analytic. He's nominalistic. He doesn't like that label, but he's practically a nominalist. What it is, right? Yeah. Well, why does he use labels for us then? And he doesn't like labels. It is what it is.
He doesn't like it for him.
Yeah, absolutely. You see, there you go. We got Terry, and Terry's my boy right now. Me and him gonna go to Outback after this. He says, "Give me a rare steak theology with a blooming onion exegesis on the side." Absolutely, we're gonna be doing that after this.
That's great. You're making me hungry.
Yeah, me too, man. Especially, we do this show right after we get back from church, so. Well, you did text me you were at Chick-fil-A, but
I'm still hungry.
I wasn't at Chick-fil-A, so I actually need to go and get me something afterwards.
I will afterwards, yeah.
But
this is a panel we had. Were you going to say this?
No, go ahead. Go ahead and explain. Okay,
this is a panel we had. SES coordinated this with Bill Craig, and it was Richard Howe and I arguing for the pro-simplicity side, and Stephen Davis and Bill Craig offering the objections. It was a good time. I had a good time. So I thought this was a good video to show for the kind of a tight view of the objections here.
All right. So by the way, Davis and Bill were on the against divine simplicity side, correct, and Richard Howe and you were for the divine simplicity side. So here you go.
That's right.
Let's check it out. And the individual you're seeing here is Davis.
That's Stephen Davis.
Yeah. And the individual
and the guy with the hair.
With the hair.
Is me.
Right.
I had a little bit of hair, yeah.
That's it. That was a young
younger anyway.
Younger, excuse me, a younger
hairier,
Brian Hoffman. So here we go.
That's right.
And by the way, Brian, stop me whenever you want if you want to say something else about what Bill is saying. Okay, and I'll try not to be not to interrupt too much. So here you go.
Go ahead, man. I don't care. Yeah.
Next, we'll have Dr. William Lane Craig, and the topic of his paper is Objections to Divine Simplicity.
It seems to me that the question of divine simplicity is not whether God is simple, but whether divine simplicity is best understood along Thomistic lines. What is distinctive of the Thomistic construal is that God's essence just...
So right off the bat, I want to say something here. Right off the bat, it is implying that there are other concepts of divine simplicity that he doesn't object to, right?
Well, he will ultimately say he believes in divine simplicity. He redefines it very differently.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Ain't that the same thing that atheists do when they say, "Well, we believe about, or not that things can come from nothing." When you redefine nothing, so
yes,
it is ironic that the champion of theism is kind of using the same tools that the atheists do when they just redefine terms that have been held for millennia or so.
He does redefine it. You must have him on a little bit faster. He's almost like he sounds not like himself.
Yeah, so I have it at 1.5 because if not, we're not going to get out of here in time.
Okay,
right?
That sounds good.
Well, you just told me that he didn't sound like himself, so it doesn't sound.
Well, it doesn't.
Okay.
I didn't say it sound good. Obviously, it's not how he talks.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go.
All right.
Is the act of being subsisting, ipsum esse subsistens, and that therefore God is simple and incomprehensible. Consider three typical objections lodged against the Thomistic construal of divine simplicity. 1. The Thomistic construal is unbiblical. One of my greatest misgivings about the Thomistic doctrine is that it is not merely unsupported by biblical teaching, but in contradiction to it. The roots of Thomas's doctrine are to be found not in the Bible, but in Neoplatonism. For thinkers like Proclus and Plotinus, the one is...
By the way, if I'm not mistaken, these are logical consequences of an unmoved mover. Like this, like divine simplicity comes from understanding this, how holding to this idea that God has no potentiality, that He's
That's right.
pure actuality, that His essence and His existence are one and the same. Right.
That's right. So we have in the Summa Theologiae by Aquinas, his magnum opus. So question 1 is about the relationship between reason and the Bible. Question 2 is God's existence, and then question 3 starts his philosophical theology apart from God's existence, and it's on simplicity. So it goes from God exists to God is simple, and everything else presupposes that. It's because God is pure act.
Okay. Good. So let's keep going.
All right.
You know, and by the way, marry someone that looks at you the same way that young Hufflin looks at Bill Craig. Okay, let's go ahead and zoom in. Okay, look at that.
Thanks.
Look at that. Okay, let's go.
Absolutely undifferentiated unity from which all multiplicity derives. By contrast, in the Bible, God is described as a positive being who has properties like holiness, power, eternality, goodness, personhood, and so on. Whereas divine attributes like omnipotence, omnipresence, eternality, holiness, and so on find support in the biblical text, there is no support for the attribute of Thomistic simplicity. Aquinas' treatment of Exodus 3:14.
Okay, that's a bit disingenuous to say that these things have support in the Bible, right? Given the fact that they're explicit, but there's no mention of the analogical approach that we all take.
That's right. And it's interesting you say that, because this entire discussion pretty much devolved into a discussion on God talk.
Yeah, because this is, and what I was gonna say is even silly me with my big old high school diploma can point stuff like this out, right? In the sense that this should be assumed that what we're doing here is talking about God in relation to our ability to analogically disclose these attributes, because they're never going to be one-to-one, because if not, you're making God one of us, right?
He does take the univocal view, though, and he says that we're not going to get there in this, but he does say that in this discussion, is that God, our language has to be univocal with God, or left with agnosticism.
Well, yeah, good for him.
I am that I am is a classic case of eisegesis. If this statement in the mind of the Pentateuchal author was meant to be a metaphysically heavy statement, rather than just a way of saying don't stick your nose into things that don't concern you, then why not take it as a proof text of divine aseity, or self-existence, or metaphysical necessity, broadly logically necessary existence? Aquinas reads his thesis of the identity of divine essence and existence into, not out of, the passage. The terrible consequence of Thomism is that all of the wonderful biblical attributes of God for which we worship him are annihilated by divine simplicity. Since the pure act of being...
when he says, by him saying annihilated, do you think that is just a rhetorical vehicle to support his position? When he says that just divine simplicity.
Yeah, because he's going to say if simplicity is true, then we really can't say God has power, God has knowledge, God has justice, because there's no distinction in God. So
and
that's
for,
what he
and for
means
him
by that.
and for him. So, but that's an issue with his position, because he has to take him univocally. You know, he's merited that, right?
That's right.
Aye.
is not...
Look at me, man, being smart.
Yeah, good job.
Hey, man.
Hey, where's my button?
Come on. Hey, you got to have it
There we go. There you go, buddy. Good job.
All right.
delimited by any essence, God becomes an unintelligible blank. The doctrine of Thomism thus bears much more resemblance to the doctrine of the absolute in religions like Hinduism and Buddhism than to the biblical doctrine of God. As a result, God is no longer religiously accessible except through mystical experience. Two, Thomistic simplicity makes God unintelligible. It is often said that since on Thomism, God is identical to his properties, and all his properties are identical to one another, Thomism threatens to make God a property. But this is absurd, since a property is not a living person, as God is. The Thomist can escape this unwelcome reduction by maintaining that, in a sense, God is not identical to his essence. Rather, he really has no essence. He just is the pure act of being, and hence not identical to any property. But that is precisely the problem. The pure act of being is inconceivable because it has no properties. Thomism thus entails a profound agnosticism about God. We can say only what God is not what he is. We really have no idea what we are talking about.
Okay, so let me say something about that. In your view, because I have heard this, this over and over. It's like every little interaction that you have online that comes from, and Craig at WLC NPC that are out there on the internet, like repeats these. So in other words, when we look at this, that we really cannot talk about God unless it's one-to-one, and this makes God unintelligible. Let me actually play this back 1 second. Okay. So let me go back, and so I can catch it.
Really about God, we can say only what God is not what he is.
So this fact that we can only say what God is not and not what he is, it is presumptuous to say that we do grasp what God is, given the fact that nobody has direct access to experiencing God as he is, only in the limited ability that he gave us to connect with him. Even people like Moses that had direct interaction. And I'm not talking about God in terms of his incarnate son. We're talking about...
That's a great distinction. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So I do get that we can have an idea of God in the incarnation when we're discussing Jesus, but God in the way that we're discussing here, or you guys were discussing in the panel, it is presumptuous to think that these attributes of God can't be broken down one-to-one just because my mind can comprehend this, therefore that's how God is. In my mind, the natural way to look at this is the analogical way. Well, God loves, but he doesn't love the way that I love, right? His love is completely other than the love I have. Now, there has to be some relation there, but the way that he loves me, and even someone like, and my wife is very biblically literal. She's very theologically inclined, but even she understands that the way that God loves is completely different than the way that I love. So to say that, and I'm going to play it once again because I can. I think you have to listen to it.
You're the producer. Do what you want.
But that is precisely the problem. The pure act of being is inconceivable because it has no properties. Thomism thus entails a profound agnosticism about God. We can say only what God is not what he is. We really have no idea what we are talking about.
That doesn't follow. Just because we talk about God negatively doesn't mean that we don't know what we're talking about. How would you answer that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I would say. One, there's actually a debate among Thomists about the how far we can go with positive theology and how much quote unquote theological darkness there is with this kind of stuff. I would say it's kind of funny actually. So we had this debate back in 2018, And then he wrote an article on impassibility, which is directly related to this on his website. And so Adam Tucker and I from SES did a response to the impassibility thing on his site. And then Bill and another podcaster responded to that. And then James White responded to that. And we're going to look at that later. I think no matter what view you hold to, you're going to have at some point, you're going to run into some level of agnosticism, because even if you do take God to have attributes in the univocal sense, he's still an infinite being, and we're finite beings. We can't comprehend that.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Even when you get to talk to the non-communicable attributes of God, like omniscience, omnipotence, those things are out of our reach. So how are you going to be selective and say because I know the communicable attributes of God, because I'm loving, I'm a loving father, or I'm a gracious, brother, or whatever. When you get to the in non-communicable attributes of God, you kind of picking and choosing which ones are within the range of your comprehensions and which ones are not.
Which ones do you think he wouldn't think is in our reach, you think? So knowledge and power would be?
I will say things like, God being omniscient or omnipresent, right? I mean, just because you can comprehend those is not something that you can ever experience, so you're never going to have a one-on-one univocal comprehension of that.
Right. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
he does define those things in this discussion. And by the way, we're not trying to pick on Bill just because to pick it on Bill. He's just a good example because we have this type objection
the
thing.
Objections. Yeah, I mean, I think he's the representative, and now there's
he is. Ryan Mullins also has a lot of work on anti-simplicity. Yeah. What's the guy's name? A Complex Being of a Simple God is, I think, the only book length I know about this from the anti-simplicity view.
Right.
But so I am. If you're not familiar, if you're watching this and you're not familiar, so we can talk about the positive aspects of theology, like God is being, God is loving. I mean, a lot of our notions of God's attributes are negative. So simplicity, and this is somewhat debated, but I think I hold more to the negative. That God's not made up of parts. Or we say God's infinite. He's not finite. Or to say he is immaterial. He's not material. To say he's eternal. He's not temporal. To say he's immutable. He's not changeable, impassible, not affected. So a lot of what we say is negative. So at some level, I think we are going to become agnostic about exactly what God is. And as somebody who's a Thomist, who does hold to more analogical God talk, I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable in not knowing what God is exactly, because I'm a finite creature. I just don't expect to be able to know what God is exactly. Right. And I don't think Bill would say he knows what God is exactly, but he doesn't like saying that we're in this kind of mystery that you and I would probably be more comfortable with.
Fine with, yeah. So there is all that. I think that there's just how far you're you're willing to move the needle or the slider when it comes to. And
I think and you would agree with this, if we know what God is, he's not much of a God.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so let's continue, and we are, I think, about 5 minutes away from where he concludes, or 6 minutes away from where he concludes. So let's listen to it. I'll try to be less. Critical.
We don't have to go over everything he says if you don't want to, but I think we've gotten the biblical objection, the properties objection. Those are two big ones.
It's fine. We're not even up on the hour of our stream, so we have time to go over this if we're trying to go about an hour and a half, and we have some great questions that we want.
Good.
That we want to answer. Minus Kike's answer. He's just a troll. Okay, so here we go.
I saw him somewhere in your chats earlier.
Yeah. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. Just a troll. He's a good troll.
Insist that through analogical predication, we can do more than say what God is not, but can often affirm that he is intelligent, living, providential, personal, powerful, and so on. The problem with this response is that these positive predicates cannot be univocally ascribed to God on Thomism. Being at best analogical predications, they have no univocal content that is true of God. God is not really personal, nor does he love you, nor is he active in the world, for the pure active being has no property.
I was going to say that the last thing, one of the things that you did share with us last time was the fact that God is even more intimate if we take a classical view of God.
Right.
Because it's not only that he knows us and he loved us and he created us, all of these things, but the fact that he's sustaining us in existence right here, right now, every moment is even more intimate than anything else.
I just wouldn't agree with that part. He said about God not loving us. You know, in his book, Time and Eternity, he says that if someone of true God can't love you, cause you or know you. Yeah. I just don't agree with those at all. I think God, on Thomism and classical theology in general, does clearly cause us, know us, and love us. But is it exactly the same? No. That we do. We're not causing anything the way he is. But we love and God loves. But is it the same thing?
Yeah.
No,
not at all. Okay, good deal. Let's keep going.
And stands in no real relations. 3, Thomistic simplicity brings about a modal collapse. Since God is absolutely similar across all possible worlds, never knowing or doing anything differently, modal...
By the way, we don't do the possible world semantic thing in a Thomistic philosophy, at least not the way they do it. So it is... Yeah,
analytic Thomists will. Those are more in the kind of Gilsonian tradition that we're in, kind of shy away from that.
Right. So what I would, and I'm talking about the tradition that we I guess we are brought into as SES kind of students, right?
And that's not even just a Thomist, non-Thomist thing. There are those who aren't even Thomistic who have objections to possible world semantics. But yeah, it's a whole other thing altogether.
Yes, I just wanted to say that because, again, most of us in the philosophical and theological realm use the tools for the camp that we are promoting, right? And there are things on the other camps that we just flat out don't accept, so they're not even an issue for us. Like, perfect example of this, I think, is when we look at things like the whole interaction problem with the body soul, the mind body interaction problem, right? That a holomorphist will never have to even contend with, because in holomorphism, you are a holomorphic composite, and this mind and body are part of who you are. So there is no interaction problem. That comes more from a perspective of let's say a Cartesian dualist. That is something that came later. So we don't even have to accept that posturing. So we don't have a problem. It's not even it's non-starter for us. Where somebody else has spent 40 years and thousands of dollars, and probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, getting an education to solve a problem that would have never arisen if you would have taken a different position, right? So I think that
I've got a blog article I want you to say. It's called the Problems Thomists Don't Have, and that's one of them.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's go.
Distinctions collapse, and there is, in effect, only one possible world. God can have no contingent knowledge or action, for everything about him is essential to him. Since God knows that P is logically equivalent to P is true, the necessity of the former entails the necessity of the latter. Thus, divine simplicity leads to an extreme fatalism, according to which everything that happens does so with logical necessity. Thomas tries to avert this unwelcome consequence by claiming that while creatures are really related to God, God is not really related to creatures. Thus, God can be absolutely similar across possible worlds, even though creatures vary wildly. The same cognitive state of God counts in one world as the knowledge that I have created creatures, and in another world as I have not created creatures. Though God's will and knowledge do not vary from world to world, creatures vary in their relations to the simple God. Wholly apart from the question of its intelligibility, the problem with this doctrine is that it makes the existence of creatures inexplicable. Since God is absolutely the same in a possible world in which no creatures exist, as he is in a world chock full of creatures, the explanation of the difference cannot be found in God. But neither can it be found in creatures, since they come too late in the order of explanation to account for why they exist or not. It follows that on Thomism, there just is no explanation of the existence of creatures or the differences between possible worlds, which seems absurd. Now, in light of these objections, it seems to me imperative that we retrace our steps and ask ourselves where things went wrong. It seems to me that the most plausible candidate for the crucial misstep is Aquinas' affirmation of a real distinction between essence and existence. It is this that lies at the root of the causal regress that terminates in something that is uncomposed of essence and existence, but just is existence itself. Why think that things are metaphysically composed of essence and existence? It might be said that there must be a real distinction between essence and existence because we can contemplate things' natures without knowing whether or not they exist. But this suffices to show only a conceptual distinction between essence and existence. We can abstract from a thing the fact of its existence as well as its non-defining properties and contemplate its nature alone. Compare the case of properties. On Aquinas' view, properties are mere entia rationis, not mind-independent realities. They are formed by the mind's abstracting from an object everything except for the particular feature in question. They are no more really distinct things than, say, the southern exposure of a house is a thing distinct from the house. Thus, we have been given no good reason for thinking that things are really composed of essence and existence. But deny the real distinction between essence and existence, and the nerve of Thomism is cut. Finally, that leads then to the question, how ought we to understand divine simplicity? Well, what about this? We reject constituent ontologies. We should not think of things as metaphysically composed in any way. In this sense, everything is simple. But there are still positive predications true of them, including God. If we want, we can strengthen divine simplicity by adding that God is not composed of separable parts. That suffices for a biblical and philosophically intelligible doctrine of divine simplicity. God is neither...
that is where he redefines divine simplicity,
yes.
Right?
Right.
All right, so let me go back a few seconds.
Strengthen divine simplicity by adding that God is not composed of separable parts. That suffices for a biblical and philosophically intelligible doctrine of divine simplicity. God is neither metaphysically composed, nor does he have separable parts. The Thomistic interpretation of divine simplicity is not essential to Christian theology. To be sure, the Catholic Church, like the Protestant Reformers, affirms divine simplicity. The Fourth Lateran Council declares God to be absolutely simple, and the First Vatican Council completely simple. But neither council cashes out these expressions in Thomistic terms. Their statements are consistent with interpretations of divine simplicity that are not committed to the radical Thomistic theses that God has no properties but is the pure act of being, unconstrained by any essence, or that God stands in any real relations to the world. Catholics and Protestants alike who balk at these claims should feel free to embrace a different understanding of divine simplicity than that offered by Aquinas.
Okay, our fourth.
All right. So, Dr. Hufflin, since you were there, is divine simplicity, because that was the first objection that he said. Divine simplicity is unbiblical. Not all the other things that he said related to divine simplicity, like intelligibility. It's unintelligible. It's and then he kind of stack up layered a multiplicity of objections. But this one is Bill's biggest objection. Divine simplicity is unbiblical.
Yeah, his point is that it's not just that it's not explicitly taught in the Bible, but it's contradictory to it. Because the Bible says things like God has these various attributes. God has love, God has power, God has justice, and just name off whatever attributes you want to name off. So if we take the Bible to mean God has distinct attributes, and this really is going to be what James White's going to argue for if you look at that in the next clip. Of course, I don't think that this is unbiblical, and neither has most people in the church, because most people in the church historically have held to divine simplicity. But even if they're well, I'll leave it at that. Most people do not believe that this doctrine is anti-biblical, any more than saying that God being timeless is anti-biblical, which again, Bill would say God is now a temporal being, He would reject all these attributes. So I don't see anywhere, and I do agree with Bill on the point that I don't use Exodus 3:14 as an argument for simplicity, and Aquinas I don't think would make it an argument. It's consistent. I do think Aquinas uses that a little bit more than I would, just to kind of bolster the claim. I don't think that's inconsistent, but it's not. I wouldn't use it as an argument for simplicity. But I don't think that the overall view is anti-biblical.
Okay. So,
because again, the Bible says that God, as you mentioned, that we have to have analyzed. I mean, cut you off there. God smells the sacrifices. God hears the cry of his people. God does all these things. It goes down to Sodom in Genesis 19. Those are not literal.
Right.
So we have to understand how is this being written. So then how do we understand these different attributes? I think that they're true, but are they true in the way that we have to make them separate and distinct ways that they exist differently from each other in God's essence? I don't think that's required.
So let me ask you a question. What about the objection that if God is simple, he cannot have distinct properties? Like that he breaks down, it makes God unintelligible. How would you approach that objection, and how would you answer that? How does classical theism explains this idea of the differences between God's attributes in knowing that in him, since he is pure actuality, each one of these attributes is the same, like that God's goodness and his wrath or his justice are identical, that God's love and God's mercy is identical, that God's power, right, and knowledge are identical.
Right. So both Bill and Plantinga make this point. Plantinga has a famous small little book called "Does God Have a Nature?" that came out in February of 1980. And both of them say if simplicity is true, then God cannot have distinct properties. Well, that's true because Thomas doesn't use the term property. The word that he would use instead would be considered accidents, which would be in following Aristotle. But an accident and a property would be the same thing. So Aquinas explicitly rejects the notion that God does have distinct accidents, because accidents are things that modify the substance, right? So if I go outside tomorrow and it's really sunny and I just sit there for 2 or 3 hours, my poor almost bald head is going to turn red. All right, so my existence will be modified and have different accidents or properties, as people would say, and I will change. The denial here is that God has properties that somehow modify his essence or substance. So Aquinas doesn't use the term properties in talking about God. He uses the word names. We can name God certain things or call God certain things. And so we would agree that God does have attributes or names or characteristics. And the distinction would be that how we know these attributes are different than how they exist. Now, a lot of people confuse how we know something to be true for how it exists, and we can't make that kind of mistake. So we know things through composed beings. In other words, we go outside and we have knowledge of different things, different parts, different kinds of everything's put together to deny Bill's claim that nothing has constituent parts. Everything has parts, and we know everything through their parts, right? So we don't have direct access to God. We have access to God through nature. Romans 1, the Psalms say this. So when we say God has knowledge and power, we're defining these things differently. We don't mean the same thing. But in God, they're just calling or characterizing God with two different words. But in God, if simplicity is true, that's just naming the same being in two different ways. They're not two different things they're pointing out. They're naming the same being, and in one way talking about God's knowledge, and another way talking about his power. So to us, they're different in our minds because how we know him. Yeah. But in him, they're the same.
Yeah, because we have to compartmentalize based on our experience.
Yes.
Because that's how we know things, right? Ourselves as humans, right?
Correct.
And then again, if we don't take that posture, we will have to say that the way that God knows something and we know something is univocal. It's the same way.
Which he does say that.
Yeah,
In this very discussion.
Well, and we will have to then the idea. I mean, we will have to include God in time, as he does when he says that whenever God created, he kind of entered creation.
Correct. So Bill says that. Bill says if God's going to be related to us, I don't mean to keep picking on Bill. He's in the forefront of all this.
He's the guy who's kind of brought all of this to the main.
Yeah, I mean he's the guy people look to for Christian theology and philosophy and apologetics. So for God to be related means he's related like you and I are related. So you say something and I respond to it. So then God must be the same way. And of course, that's, again, not how we would hold to it in the classical framework.
The easy way. So how about we go to another guy that if he goes biking on a hot summer day, his bald head will, get red spots. So,
are you saying we're the same?
No. Let's go ahead on and look into this video. In this video, if I'm not mistaken, it's how many minutes? About a 7-minute clip.
Yeah, you don't have to watch the whole thing here. To put this in context, this is James White responding to not the video we just watched, but a podcast, an audio-only podcast that Bill is interacting with someone else talking about a podcast Adam and I did at SES.
At SES. All right, so let's go. And if that podcast is still out there, we'll put it in the show notes. We'll put this video in the show notes.
It's somewhere.
Yeah, we'll put the and we'll put the debate on the show notes because that's on Dr. Craig's Reasonable Faith channel. And this one is from the clips from I guess the Dividing Line that James White does. So let's check it out.
Okay.
And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if he's still doing this, but it was almost like he's got a James White tracker thing that everybody says something about James White. He goes back and put it in his show. It's like he could,
I was gonna say, I look up to both these guys as in different ways as scholars do. Bill is a great scholar. I'll never attain his level of scholarship. And I used to listen to James debates all the time when I was in seminary. Yeah. Actually, before seminary, I think I was reading his books.
Book is still one of the. I mean, I would love to get that translated into Spanish. So it's not that we have. We have
personal axe to grind.
Yeah. It is theological positions, and it is fun to have. I mean, I'm gonna say something. If you want to get in this business, you better have thick skin and don't be a freaking snowflake, because then you're not gonna survive. If you're just a little mama CC boy, don't get into this, and because then you're gonna be curled up in a corner, rocking back and forth for the rest of your academic life, because people are gonna be. It's part of the discipline. It's part of the exercise. It's part of the game. If you don't want this, then don't get in it. And just go find and do something else where people are not going to be looking at what you said and try to pick it apart. This is just the nature of the game. People like Bill Craig knew this and they handle it well. I mean, I know that in this also business, there are people with egos and they get angry and they look stupid. And I have looked stupid doing this before. And
I have to.
You have to be able to be humble and to say, you know what? I don't know everything. I mean, I don't have the kind of knowledge that God has. So therefore, I have to be okay with my humanity and my limited understanding, and I'm going to make mistakes. Now, there are people who present themselves that are smarter than they are. Hopefully, we're not doing that here. In the academic circles, people get called out for these things, and I have seen moments in the lives of both of these guys that have been foundational for me in my understanding of theology. And I also have seen both of these guys be complete, egocentric in the way that they handle certain situations. But guess what? Those are things the humans that deal with the sinfulness of your flesh are going to do. These are things that are expected. So they're not any better or any worse than anybody else. They just living in the human condition. And there's going to be a moment where they're going to have glorified bodies, and those egos are not going to be there anymore. And we're going to be, like brothers in heaven for eternity, and those deficiencies are going to be no more. Right? So
that's right.
It's not that we're better than them. We're picking at their ideas, not at them as individuals, because I have good days and I have bad days. I have days where I'm walking with the humility of the next saint, and there are days when I'm walking around like my dookie don't stink because I'm so egotistical and proud. So those are the things that define us as humans on this side of Eden. That's it.
And these two in particular, also I picked these clips because they're interacting with me in particular. We had a relationship doing this in some regard.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's get back to it.
All right.
And by the way, if you don't agree with what you said, you're full of pride on the other side, because we do this to each other all the time, and we're not the nicest. So we need to do better as a collective. But yes, let's deal with ideas. Agreed. And let's understand that these people have good days and bad days, and that they're sinners just like me and everybody else on this broadcast. Okay? Let's go.
I saw a link, and was it? I think it just popped up my podcast thing, as I recall. I don't remember, but who knows where stuff comes from these days. But I went ahead and clicked on it. It was surprising. Why was it surprising? I pretty much agreed with Craig's defense of his own position. He was responding to some guys from Southern Evangelical Seminary. And basically, without going into a lot of detail.
So some guys were you and Adam.
Me and Adam, right? Yeah.
It was about the doctrine of divine simplicity as promulgated by and interpreted by Thomas Aquinas. And if we were talking about divine simplicity simply in the idea that God is not composed of parts, that there are not parts of God that are more basic than the being of God. So God's being is not made up of lesser parts that you take a part out and there's no more divine being, but you can identify these lesser parts and you put all these parts together and now you've got God. He's not complex, but he's simple in that sense. Craig wouldn't have any problem with that. I certainly don't have any problem with that. I don't think...
That's, again, a redefinition of simplicity, once again, right at the very top of the video. So how would you describe what kind of issues do you have with what he just said in terms of?
Well, I agree that we that is what simplicity is that we don't think God has parts and is broken down, but Aquinas and all those before him are it's not just that God doesn't have parts, it's specific kind of parts. It's form and matter, it's substance and properties, as Bill would say. But the way he's going to go on to define this is that God, that is James, is going to be that the attributes of God are distinct. Okay. And that is going to be denied by simplicity. I mean, that is a redefinition of simplicity. In fact, we responded to James here, and James was talking to Adam while we were having the conversations. It was kind of like a multi-directional back and forth with Bill and all of us. It was fun. It's just a redefinition of what it is.
Historic Christian theologians would have any problem with that. But as Aquinas evidently takes this results in the thing that Jake was talking about, the idea that you cannot discuss the attributes of God in a way that would make them different from one another, because that then becomes parts, which denies the simplicity of God. So God's omniscience is his omnipresence. You can't distinguish them. And I'm like, and basically Craig was saying, that doesn't make any sense. And I was going, yeah, he's right. It doesn't make any sense. And yet that's this classic.
How would you say that does make sense? And I know you explained it earlier, but explain it again.
that the idea of simplicity, if I heard him right, because I'm listening to this, I'm thinking through some things, wouldn't make sense.
I can replay it for you if you want.
Yeah, replay that, because I was thinking about something as he said that. I'm not sure if I'm hearing him right.
You can't. With the.
Hope I don't sound like this when you turn this to me and change me and make you go faster.
Yeah, well, that's how you always sound in my head. I'm sure these guys are gonna take you serious after.
I know.
You know what I mean? They're like, okay, I used to interact with that fella Huffling, but I heard him like a chipmunk, so I'm done. You know,
that's all right.
All right, here you go.
In a way that would make them different from one another, because that then becomes parts, which denies the simplicity of God. So God's omniscience is his omnipresence.
Oh, I
see. Can't distinguish them. And I'm like, and basically Craig was saying, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm sort of going, yeah, he's right. It doesn't make any sense. And yet that's this classical theism stuff that's being presented now. And it's
not really.
Yeah, not presented now. It's just like you're just picking out of now. But
yeah, so we do not say that knowledge is defined as power or whatever, and that we can't have different attributes.
Right.
We don't define them as properties, because properties by definition modify something else. But a characteristic or an attribute or a name, as Aquinas uses, isn't making a modification. It's just a way of describing something. So we wouldn't characterize it the way that James just did, in saying that we can't have these different attributes. It's that these attributes, as we know them and understand them through our physical experience, we pick them out separately in our mind and definitionally, but we apply them to the complete unified being of God. They are the same, because we're just describing the one simple being of God.
Okay, let's keep going.
Aquinas's formulation. Now, I've talked about Aquinas over the years, and we've talked about I don't even know how to describe it, but the absolute centrality of Aquinas to everything at Southern Evangelicalism. I mean, it's just, he's not just a patron saint. He's
he's like, it's like, I don't get it. Yeah. Well, we are Thomistic in our philosophy. Yeah, and an understanding of God.
It depends on the program, of course. I mean, yes, for the philosophy program, he is in theology, but that's a little bit overstated. But yeah, I mean, in general, we're very Thomistic.
Yeah,
almost a central figure there. And what the result of that has been, and it's not been a good result. I mean, when you have enough of your seminary graduates and former employees who become Roman Catholics to write a book, that probably indicates you lost your balance someplace along the way. And Aquinas
that's
was
a cheap shot, and that he probably couldn't put a number at all on that. Yeah. And we have looked at the numbers, and it's way under at about 5% over 30 years.
Yeah,
we've had like
nothing.
30 or 40 students in 30 years.
Well,
and
I'm sure
gonna have
listen,
that.
I'll tell you, when I have something like that, it's hard not to be, hold on, let me see. It's hard not to be when you when you have something like that. You got to throw it out there. I mean, it's hard to keep it in your pocket. So I understand he had to say it. And if I was him, I would have said it. Right. So
it's just wrong, because
I know it's wrong, but when you have something like that juicy that is gonna make a splash, and when you have a big industrial fan above you, and you got a lot of people that, and you have a turd in your head, you're going to throw it in and make sure that everybody gets smeared. Right. So that I can relate to him with stuff like that. And I guess that's some of the things that, it is this internal fight about, because listen, when I'm doing, and this happens to me a lot, we all have kind of like those things in our arsenal that will make the point for us in a very illegitimate way, because we want to be able to make points along the way in the conversation, right? But those are some of those things we shouldn't use at all. and I believe in this case, in the case of James here, that was the case. That was absolutely unnecessary, right? To say that. But I guess, he got to get some students in his seminary too, right? So I get it. I get it. I would say that I would have done the same thing. So
yeah, they like to make a lot of much to do about the alleged conversions, and there really aren't that many.
Yeah.
In fact, the book he's referring to, I read the book. I know a lot of people in the book, and they were not converted because of what we do with Thomas Aquinas. Many were for different reasons.
No, you got to throw it out there. Come on, man. You got to throw it out there.
I know.
Man.
This is something that's irked me for a long time because we were talking about it. He brought it up. I'm just going to say it. So there we go.
Yeah, it is. Let him have it. It's one.
No, it is wrong about this one.
Well, what I know is wrong. What I'm saying, I'm 100% with you that he's wrong about that. But what I'm saying is he used it, whether he's wrong or not.
It's rhetorical.
He is rhetorical. That's right. It. And those rhetorical kind of jabs. Yeah, I mean, look at you. It did leave you with a little bit of a sore, a sore spot somewhere, and it that's what they use it for, right? And it is very interesting. My wife always tells me that he who has the ability to anger you controls you, right?
That's right. That's why God's impassible.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't control God.
We don't control God. There you look at you using this wise sayings to make a theological point, man. I might learn a thing or two from you every now and then.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, let's continue.
Way drug for those folks. And they all said it in their book. I listened to their book. They all said, yep, it was Aquinas that got me thinking along these paths, these lines. So I was pretty amazed to be listening to.
Well, at least it was Aquinas and not Geisler, right? Well, it was Aquinas. Well, and I don't even know if that's 100% true, but anyways, if you read
the book, it really isn't because we taught Aquinas. It's because they had family pulling them that way. Some of them said they were doing that way before they even came to SDS.
Right.
Not charitable to us at all, and won't even engage with us when we invite them to debate this topic.
Right. Well, that's what happened, man.
That's right.
Look what happened. There was just a guy, some charismatic guy, and I will say, well, some charismatic guy, they yell a lot. Well, most of them yell a lot. So that wouldn't allow you to identify him.
Yeah, a little more,
out of a lineup. But
that's right. Well, I used to be charismatic and Pentecostal, word faithy, and all that. So I've been there.
Yeah. But by the way, if you've been here this long at the show, at the hour, we are at 1 hour and 30 minutes, make sure that you can leave your donation so we can kill all these giants on this show. You can send us PayPal, Zelle, crypto. You know what I'm saying? Make sure that you leave more than your 10% here, right now, and God will triple your blessings. Okay, right. So
I watched TV one night years ago, and there was one of these guys in there, and they had money floating in the background. Unless he was trying.
I can do that. I don't tempt me, man. I can have money floating in your background. I got.
You made me say what you want, right? You and Alan.
Yeah. But anyways, let's go back to. We're never gonna finish this, and we got a bunch of questions here, so let's go ahead and do this. Let's finish this up.
Let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
Craig. Rebuttal, defending himself and going, I would agree that criticism, no, that doesn't, I was surprised. But I think it's because.
By the way, he doesn't see eye to eye to Craig a lot, so I think he was excited.
That's why he's surprised. Right,
Yeah, because he's like super, uber, triple duper reform. Double predestination, hoo-ha. God chose me from the foundation of the world, and all of that, and then a bag of chips. Yeah,
heard that in a while.
Yeah. Anyways, what is your PayPal account? There's people asking about the PayPal, so you can kill your giants. You will never go without. Anyway,
we need to get some more sleep, man.
Yeah. Okay, let's go, because we still have a few more minutes.
becoming more concerned about this new emphasis upon.
By the way, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these clips will end up in the dividing line.
I know.
He's gonna be like, "Who are these clowns?"
That's right.
He'll hop on his bike and listen to the whole show.
I don't know the bike thing. Is he a big biker, or you keep saying the bike thing?
Yeah. You find him on X. Like I said, I like to listen to all of these guys and watch their back and forth
I used to
and
do them
all
all the
that.
time.
Yeah. Okay.
Classical theology, i.e., Aquinas. And
That's right.
Aquinas seems to me that Reformed.
Hey, man, no shame in your game, baby. You got it on lock, man.
That's right.
Okay, let's go.
Guys are just overwhelmed with his brilliance, and as a result, can't see the fundamentally compromised foundation upon which he stands, which comes from a fundamentally compromised epistemology, which comes from a fundamentally compromised anthropology in regards to what the gospel is. So I know there are Reformed guys, RC Love.
Yeah, because his Reformed views are so much better. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess he's talking about sin, the relation of sin to. I'm not sure what he's referring to with the anthropology stuff there.
Well, I don't know, but definitely, that right there. I'm closing this, and we're gonna change this channel to Reformed theology from now on. That's it. That put the last nail.
Respond to that real quick, and then go to the questions while they're still here.
Yeah. So let's just finish up. Hold on.
Okay.
Come on. Can you resist those blue eyes? Come on. Let's.
Wow.
Now we're gonna end up in the. We're gonna be the main cores on the dividing line.
We're gonna go viral for the wrong reason.
Yeah. Well, I guess we were predestined to do that.
There we go.
Just don't let Leighton Flowers know.
Oh wow. Did they debate?
They've been back and forth.
I know Flowers debated my friend a while back.
Yeah, they go back and forth all the time, man.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
I guess that's it's interesting to see. That this is that's why you have to have tough skin for this, and I'm fine. I can be in the dividing line. I can make fun of me. Talk about what we're doing. Get us out there, because there are people that are going to go listen to this, and it's good. Go consume his content.
Yeah.
That's why we're doing it. At the end of the day, each one of us make our own decisions when it comes to matters of theology, philosophy, apologetics, whatever camp we want to end up in. I mean, what we eat, for breakfast. I mean, all of those. We are responsible for each one of these things, and consuming if consuming his content, it's the same thing. If reading Aquinas make you a Catholic, you know what I'm saying? Because if consuming his content is going to make you Reformed, I mean that is so much more than just whatever you saw here. There are always other motives, right? There's always other reasons. This might be the seed, or that might be the last push, but there's a whole bunch of reasons other than just consuming the content. They can sway you one way or another.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
So Aquinas, there are Reformed guys that try to read into Aquinas, but there's just too much there that is thoroughly problematic to really rescue him. And so I am concerned, because I'm seeing in a lot of Presbyterian circles, but Baptist circles as well, Reformed Baptist circles, this move toward a Thomistic emphasis.
It's very interesting, because there is and I'm telling you, man, it's here in the States and overseas, the Thomism, it is the thing. Actually, the top two guys in Spanish apologetic circles are Thomistic.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. So even so much more so than here. And by the way, for someone like James, his world is the continental United States. You know what I mean? So me, I'm plugged into whatever is happening in Europe, especially Spain and Portugal. I'm always plugged in there. I'm plugged in what's happening in Central America, Mexico, Central America, South America, even in the islands like Dominican Republic and Cuba. So I have a broad spectrum of data, and the Thomistic perspective is dominating. Right, but
That's
here,
interesting. I didn't know that.
and even it's interesting too that even here in the States, the Reform perspective is it used to be with the Sproul and the what was the other guy? So we had Tim Keller and R.C. Sproul, and we had Piper, and we had all of these other things. What was the other guy that also passed away? Not too long ago, I'm from California. He was
the Lordship guy.
I forgot his. I
can't think of his name either.
But they were they were very very Reform, and that was a powerhouse for a while. But now you look and the Reform camp is. It has weakened a lot.
John MacArthur.
Yeah, MacArthur. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it has weakened a lot. So I can see how things like this can become the fishbone in the throat of someone like him,
Where you transition the necessary fundamental foundational assertion of God's absolute monotheism. There is only one being of God. God's being is not complex. It's not made up of lesser subordinate parts that come together to create a greater whole.
Tell him.
That's absolutely true.
Preach it, brother. Yeah, he's saying it right now. This segment's good.
A description of that being of God, such as his omnipresence or his omniscience, is an assertion that those things have being outside of God's being, so that they are some lesser item. That simply does not follow. Now you're hearing one aspect of what happens when you do the dividing line outside of the studio, and that is one of my cats is interested in treats right now. So that's just later, Darth. We'll just hold on. Trying to tell a cat to have patience. There is a worthless task right there. I can assure you of that. But anyway, so I'm seeing.
Well, telling a cat to have patience is the same as telling a Calvinist that predestination and election are not the same thing. It's just it's incomprehensible. You didn't get the joke. Are you still here?
I guess not.
I thought you froze, man. Thought I was here.
I was trying to think what you're trying to say there.
Yeah. Anyways, it was a joke, man. It was a theological joke. Hopefully, people on the other side did get it.
I hope so. I hope so.
Okay, here you go.
More and more of this, and I'm concerned about it. And
well, good. Concerned because people are, getting warmed up on the Thomistic divine simplicity stuff. This is good stuff, man. Let's give him a round of applause, baby. Come on. Let's do it. Hold on.
I'll beat you. How's that? Yeah,
Absolutely. Okay, this is the end.
So it was interesting to hear William Lane Craig commenting on that, and my going, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Okay, that was it. That is it. All right, so any comments or questions?
I think we pretty much discussed his main objection, which to me was a separate attribute issue of if simplicity is true, we can't have separate attributes. And God, I don't think there are separate attributes. That's what the position is. When we talk about God, though, we're not trying to say that knowledge and power or whatever else are the same to us. We're just naming God. They're not properties that modify God. They're ways of just describing the one simple essence of God.
Yeah.
I think that's the gist of his objection.
Okay. Right. So we have some, and Terry has a super chat here. Thank you for that, Terry. And I actually I want to go ahead on and answer or say something about what he just said on the super chat, but I want to put it on the screen and I don't have it, so I'm gonna go and try and answer it or ask some of these questions here. Like I said, it's a little difficult because I don't have my main question thing in front of me, so I haven't been able to save the questions individually because of that page error that I showed you earlier. But I have some of the questions here for you guys. Let's see. Starting with previous questions, as I leave your questions earlier.
I hope you're not frozen. Okay, good.
No, I'm not. I'm trying to find the questions here that a bunch of people left questions.
Oh, good. You lost the questions?
Yeah, I lost the questions. I'm trying to get the questions here.
Well, they're trying. I give them that. Good job, guys.
Yeah, let me see. Let me see. I got this one. He says, how can God know a contingent truth, such as my decision to get up today, without that knowledge introducing a real relationship and accidental determination into his own eternal essence?
Well, so when Aquinas denies a real relation, and what Bill Craig was referring to, that's just one of dependence. It doesn't mean that God's not related to us in any way, shape, or form. God's our cause, for example, and that's a relationship. The kind of relation that Aquinas is denying here is one of dependency. But when most people think of how does God know that I'm going to pick up my phone and wave it like this, most people think that God is, and I'm not saying the person making the question, but this is a lot of people how people think, is that God's knowledge is passive, that God's learning something, that God is somehow passive. In fact, even Bill says this, that there's a sense in which God's learning because he's in time and he's reactive and in this kind of relationship in time. The Thomistic view, to keep using that word again, is not that God is passively learning something, but God is always actively causing. So God wills from all eternity and didn't have to will us. He could have willed nothing. He could have willed something else. But whatever he wills, he does will necessarily, eternally, immutably, and simply. Different kinds of necessity between absolute necessity, where God has to do something or something has to be the case, and there being what's called a suppositional necessity or contingent or a conditional necessity. Whereas if God wills us, he wills it from all eternity. And so I think that's the answer to this question, is that God's not learning anything. He's willing all things. And I think that this works with a compatibilist view of freedom, is that, yeah, I will to do whatever, but God is working through me and I'm a secondary cause. So it's not conditioned in that God, it's not contingent in the sense that God is receiving knowledge. It's only contingent that God wills something. I hope that answers the question. If the person's still here, feel free to write back.
That was my buddy Kike, you know.
Okay, great.
So he asked that question. I don't know if he's here or not, but since he worked for me, I'll make him rewatch it if he didn't. If he left. Okay. So this one, it was at the top, the very beginning of the show, and is divine simplicity the consequence of God's perfection?
It's not a consequence of anything. It's just describing what God is not. He's not composed of parts. But we could talk about in fact, we're going to do if we keep this sequence going, God's perfection is coming up quickly in our weekly streams. So for God to be perfect, it just means that he has complete, infinite existence. That perfection and goodness really are the same here. And that, I know simplicity precedes that in Aquinas' writing, but it's not a simplicity. Well, it does precede that, so it's not a consequence of perfection. If he had said anything, perfection is a just a way of looking at nothing is a consequence in God in that kind of sense, or he wouldn't be simple. But it's just a way of understanding God. So God is simple. He's also good. He's perfect in the sense that he is complete, unified, infinite being with no corruption, as Augustine would define evil in that regard.
Yeah.
And feel free to write back to my answering these questions the way that makes sense to you.
Yeah, well, Kike is here, so... And by the way, he says, I'm neoclassical. I support my boss. Yeah, I'm not. I'm not, because he's just a troll, I tell you.
Neoclassical?
Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm not. But he's trolling me. You know,
I know he's neoclassical. Okay.
Yeah, he said even if I'm neoclassical, I support my boss. So
I see.
Yeah, he's wrong in more ways than one. By the way, so what I want to say is Terry is saying, and it says I've heard that the Roman Catholic Church now accepts Bitcoin for indulgences, and I think
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I don't know if they're doing that. I don't know if they take indulgences, right? I'm sure that they take.
They do that.
I know that
they do take indulgences.
Oh, they do. So did they? I know that I know that they take the offering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they have a way to do it through Bitcoin. And I
did not know
learn
that.
about that through this book called Moral Money: The Case for Bitcoin. This is probably one of the best books you want to get about why Bitcoin is the most biblical currency ever designed, because it has all the moral properties of what money should be. There is a limited amount. It is fungible. It is easy to transport. It is most secure than most. It is actually accessible by anyone and everyone. I mean, it just has all the properties that what good money should look like.
That's really interesting that they're taking it. If that's the case, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so it is called Moral Money. It's actually a Catholic guy that wrote it. If you wanted a Protestant evangelical take on it, thank God for Bitcoin, the creation, corruption, and redemption of money. So these are two great books. I don't knock off the Catholic Church for taking these. I would say the more evangelical churches and ministries should be taking this kind of support through Web3 and digital means. A ministry that I used to work for, that I shall leave unnamed, I make that proposition and they look at me like I had three heads. Well, guess what? You know,
we're going there, huh?
This is the future. And if
I agree with that. Yeah.
And if you're staying behind, well, the joke is on you. You know what I mean? And what I'm saying is, and I'm not saying anything positive about indulgences, right? But what I'm saying is that the Web3 and the digital route of currencies is the way to go. Has nothing to do with the end of the world or Satan or anything like that.
Yeah, you could do that with the Protestant church too. Yeah.
Right.
That's how it's probably going to end up going.
So it's gonna come. I mean, and by the way, let me just explain something to everybody who is doing on the on the other side of the screen. 80 to 85% of the U.S. currency do not exist. It is all digital money. If we all go to our banks right now and ask for cash for all of our savings, check-ins, and everything else, the whole banking system will collapse.
Right.
Because about 80% of your money is digital. It doesn't exist. It is just numbers on a computer, whether it's US dollars or euros or pesos or yen or whatever. It's all floating in a computer somewhere. The difference is Web3 is decentralized DeFi, and then regular banking is TradFi, which is traditional financing. And listen, I'd rather have... I'm telling you, this way.
Terry pushed a button with you, man.
I'm telling you, no, Terry is my boy. I'm gonna give Terry because Terry is buying those books right now. He said, "Thanks for the book recommendation.
Oh, did he really?
I'm buying it ASAP. I'm
nice.
Lutheran, so you probably know which book I'm picking up." Absolutely. Actually, both of them are good.
Yeah.
You know, both books are good, and I will say that the treatment by Eric Sammons for the Moral Money, the Case for Bitcoin, is much more thorough than the Thank God for Bitcoin I got both of them in audiobooks, and I enjoy Salmon's more than I enjoy this other one by it's a group of guy called the Bitcoin and Bible Group.
Wow.
It is
That'd be a cool show to do one day.
Yeah. And I actually was gonna do a live stream with a buddy of mine about this in one of his channels in Latin America. And like I said, I no longer create content for that ministry anymore. So I'm probably gonna do it independently with another fella. But anyways, this is the end of the stream for today.
Any more questions?
Had a lot of fun. I don't think we have any more questions other than
Did you
that
lose them?
one.
Or we still got all of them? We get all of them that were asked?
Look at what Kike is saying. Buy cult. He just put it on
all
the
right.
chat. Yeah, buy
Sweet.
cult. He knows. He's working for his bag, baby. Let me see.
Cult is an XRP meme coin if you don't know what that is.
Yeah. That's a meme coin on the XRP. Let me see. Yeah, I don't think I have any
Hope
more.
you got all the questions answered. If you ask questions, thank you for asking and thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's say, God tarnishes my mental health. Sorry to say, but I am terrified of God. Why should I fear him? And if I fear him, what should I love him?
That's a question in the chat.
Yeah, that was a question in the chat.
Read it again for me.
It says, God tarnishes, and this came during the time where I was talking about God's mental health, like God, understanding God better will get you. If you do theology and you understand the love of God, that will help your mental health when you're elevating your knowledge of God in your spiritual spiritual connection, or a spiritual understanding, because you understand how much you're loved and how much it was done for you, and how much to what extreme God would go to make sure that one day, if you trust in him and you obey the gospel, then you will have an eternity with him, So, but the question here was, God tarnishes my mental health. Sorry to say, but I'm terrified of God. Why should I fear him? And if I fear him, why should I love him? And from my perspective, I think that you have a fundamental erroneous view of who God is to begin with. That would be my initial approach on how to look at God. But how would you tackle that?
Yeah, I understand that. And so Terry, who's Lutheran, I love studying Martin Luther. Martin Luther was the same way. He had this terrifying fear of God, of God's judgment, of God's wrath. I was the same way. I was very paranoid when I was younger, about 15, 16, scared of God. I had to make sure I did everything correctly, and was afraid of God's wrath. And there is a sense in which that we should be afraid of God. I mean, Jesus said to not to fear man who can just destroy the body, but to fear God who can destroy the soul and put it in hell as well. There's a real sense of fear there, but it's a fear that we have to understand, and that God's not out to get us. If that's what, I'm not sure how the person is saying that God tarnishes his thoughts and everything. Lots of questions I would ask there, but I would say God is not out to get us. God does love us, and that he wants us to come to him. And if you have a fear of God, it's good that you believe in God to have that fear. That's the first step, I would say. There's a goodness there because it recognizes the existence and the reality of God. But I would say I would ask the person, are you praying and trying to figure out, I don't know what the cause is. Are you praying? Are you reading the Bible to try to work through this fear? And are you going to church? Are you talking to somebody? And are you being discipled? Or do you have friends that can talk to you? I'm happy to talk to you if you're still here and want to talk later. Having a right view, like you were saying, Jorge, about that God isn't out there to get us or squash us, but God loves us. It's hard to answer not knowing the motivation for the fear, but knowing that God loved us, and the way he showed his love is by sending Jesus to save us. And that should be that should give us comfort, and the gospel should give us comfort, and that he made a way for us to be with him and live with him forever. Hard to answer. I want to answer that better, but it's hard to know how to without knowing the reason. So if you're still here and watching this, feel free to reach out, classicaltheology@gmail.com, and love to talk to you more.
Yeah, and I want to say
if
something.
anybody has questions, feel that too.
Yeah, and I want to say, this is good cop, bad cop, and obviously everybody knows who's the good cop and who's the bad cop. And I will say this, the reason most of the time when I was afraid of God is when I was up to no good. Right? So that increased the paranoia and the fear of God that I had when I was growing up. Yeah. And like I said, that's one of those things that led me to analyze my own life and say, why am I always so nervous about, this idea that I know that we all know that we're always being watched. We just look the other way. Right. Yeah. And that has to do with the fact that God is I remember I used to tell my kids all the time, God is always in the room. Right. And, I think that's something to consider, if that might be an angle that he could think about. But anyways,
and fear also is not always a bad thing.
Yeah,
fear can be good. Now, if it's saying it's tarnishing everything, then it's unhealthy. But fear can be a good thing. I will just try to seek out somebody who can help, and we're here to help you if you want to talk, and just pray to God and ask. And I'd love to talk to you more about that, but pray, find someone to walk with you, read the Gospel of John. I would say the first epistle of John as well. Yeah, and find someone to help you with that.
All right. With that being said, thank you, Terry. He says great live stream, learn a lot.
Thanks, Terry.
I'm getting both of those books. Absolutely. Thanks everybody. And we want to say this, I owe to Bill Craig a lot, learn a lot,
likewise.
And but
and
then
James.
Again, this is, and James is, and this is just the nature of the field that we're in. Also with James White, like I said, even though I don't subscribe to Reformed theology and like to pick on it, his book on the Trinity, I would love to get the rights to translate it into Spanish and promote it. Right? We all know that if God would require theological accuracy and perfection for us to get to heaven, nobody would make it.
That's right.
Right. So we're going to be in heaven and we're going to be taught one day the right perspective for all of that. But until then, we can continue to do this and have fun and, have thick skin. And if you're putting yourself out there, you're putting yourself out there, and if you don't like it, don't put yourself out there. Right. So it's just the name of the game. And with that being said, thank you all for watching. Thank everybody who are watching on X. We have over 24 people watching on X. We had multiple people watching on Facebook, and obviously our low latency crowd watching from YouTube as well. And with that, I'll give you the last words, brother, and then we can head out.
Okay. Thank you guys for being here. I know it's been a long show. It's been fun, at least for me, and I guess Jorge as well. Had a good time tonight. And thanks for your being here, for your support, for your questions. Please like and share if you did like it, and let us know what you want to learn more about. Leave us comments if you're watching this later. Hope to see you next time. Until then, stay classy.